The first thing the townsfolk heard was the scream, pitched, terrified, a sound sharp enough to cut through the dusty afternoon air like a knife. Cowboy. Luke Mallory was tying his horse outside the general store when the scream broke loose. From behind the saloon, Stink pulled his head around. He knew the sound of fear better than most men. He had heard it in soldiers, in horses, in children displaced by raids and droughts. But this scream carried something else inside of it. Hopelessness. He dropped the reins and ran. Behind the saloon stood a woman in a torn apron, her face twisted with rage, both hands gripping the arm of a teenage girl. The woman yanked the girl, so fiercely, her thin frame jerked sideways. Dust rose from the ground, where the girl's knees scraped, as she tried not to fall. "Get up," the stepmother snarled. "I said get up, you useless little snake." Luke didn't know the girl, but he recognized the look someone who had learned to endure pain in silence. Someone who had been taught that crying only made things worse. Her gaze was downward, shoulders hunched, as if she was trying to make herself invisible. The stepmother raised her hand again. Luke stepped forward. "Don't touch that girl." The woman spun around. "This ain't your business, cowboy." Luke's voice dropped low, steady, unshakable. "Sell her to me." The entire alley went silent. The girl's eyes widened, not in fear but confusion. The stepmother's mouth hung open for a second before twisting into a greedy smirk. "Well now," she said, dusting off her apron. "We'll see what she's worth." Chapter 1. The girl neighed WANT. Her name is Clara. 16. Quiet. A slip of a girl who carried the weariness of someone twice her age. Her father had died in a river accident 2 years prior, leaving her with a woman who saw her less. As stepchild, and more as cheap labor, Luke had seen cruelty before. But something about Clara's limp wrist, her bruised cheekbone, the faint tremble in her fingers, it churned something deep inside him. The stepmother dragged Clara forward like livestock. $20. Ow. Luke stared back without blinking. 10? You kidding? She works harder than any ranch hand. She cooks, cleans, does the wash, and don't talk back. And you beat her, he replied. 10, the stepmother scoffed. 15. 12, she hesitated. Greed battled with pride, then greed won. Fine. Luke didn't bother shaking her hand. He simply stepped between them, took Clara gently by the shoulder, and said, "You're coming with me." As he led her out of town, Clara kept looking, back over her shoulder, as if someone might call her name, but no one did. Chapter 2. A home she didn't trust. Luke lived miles out on the plains. At a ranch only he and his old dog called home. He rode ahead in silence, letting Clara keep her distance behind him on the saddle. When they finally reached the ranch house, Clara stopped at the edge of the porch like she wasn't allowed to go further. "This is your house?" she asked quietly. "It's ours now," Luke said, pushing the door open. She didn't move. Luke realized she was waiting for orders, afraid to enter without permission. "Clara," he said, voice softening, "you can walk wherever you like. Here, no one's going to hit you for it." Her eyes flickered with disbelief. Inside, she hovered near the door, shoulders tight. She glanced at the broom, the kitchen, the wash basin in her eyes, scanning for the chores she might be punished for. Leaving undone, Luke set his hat down. "You don't work for me." She stayed silent. "You're not a servant, and you're not property. You're safe here." Clara nodded but didn't seem to believe him. Trauma does not disappear with kind words. It waits, clings, shadows every corner. Luke knew better than to push. "You hungry?" Maid, she nodded again. He made stew. She barely touched hers, eating as though she expected the bowl to be yanked away. When she whispered, "Thank you," her voice cracked like it had forgotten how to speak gently. Luke pretended not to notice. Chapter 3. The past FOLOWS 4 weeks. Clara barely slept. Luke would wake in the middle of the night to hear her pacing, flinching at the creak of floorboards. When he'd ask if she was all right, she'd stiffen like she was bracing for scolding. She also tried to clean everything. Every table, every rail, every pot. One morning, Luke found her outside scrubbing the barn floorboards with her bare hands. Knuckles bleeding, he knelt beside her. You don't have to do that, he said. Clara didn't look up. If I don't work, I'm useless. Not here, he replied gently. It's not ever again. Tears hit the dusty floor, silent, uncontrollable. Clara didn't know how to cry. Without apologizing, but she tried. She whispered, I'm sorry, over and over, as if afraid she'd be sent back. Luke didn't touch her. He knew some wounds burned at the slightest contact, but he sat with her until her hand stopped shaking. Chapter 4. 2. The stepmother RE2RNSPs never last long on the frontier. One morning, Clara froze when she saw a wagon approaching the stepmother's wagon. Luke stepped outside with the calmness of a man ready to fight if needed. The woman hopped down, waving a paper. You can't just take her. She's mine. You sold her, Luke said. I regret that, she snapped, and I want her back. No, Luke replied simply. The stepmother glared. Then I'll call the law. I'll say you forced me. Clara stepped forward, surprising them both. You hit me, she said. You burned me when the water spilled. You locked me in the storeroom. You told people I stole food when I didn't eat for 2 days. The stepmother's jaw tightened. Lies. Luke folded his arms. Tell the sheriff. And if he hears the truth from both of us, I doubt he'll side with you. Fear flickered across the woman's face. She hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from the girl. She snapped her reins and stormed off in her wagon, shouting something about ungrateful brats. Clara watched her leave. Her knees trembled with relief. Luke placed his hat back on. That won't be the last time she comes around. I'm not scared, Clara whispered. But Luke saw her fingers trembling. Chapter 5. Learning 2. Life at the weeks that followed changed. Clara slowly, painfully, beautifully. She learned to smile, not often, but honestly. She learned to sleep through the night without waking in a panic. She learned to ride Luke's second horse, Ginger. Laughing softly when the mare snorted into her hair, she spent afternoons sitting on the fence, rails watching sunsets instead of watching for footsteps. Luke watched from a distance, proud, protective, grateful. One evening, as the horizon glowed orange, Clara said, No one ever wanted me. Luke shook his head. You were never the problem. Some people just don't know how to love right. She looked at him, eyes glistening. For saving me, he answered truthfully, you saved yourself. I just opened the door. Chapter 6. The Last CIO, enthroned. Pierrot months later, the stepmother returned, this time with 2 men and the sheriff. Word spread fast in small towns, and the sheriff insisted all parties gather to clear the matter once and for all. Met at town hall. Clara stood before them, no longer trembling. No longer shrinking, but still fragile in ways only she and Luke understood. The stepmother pointed accusingly. She's my stepdaughter. I didn't give permission for her to leave. You sold me, Clara said. The sheriff turned. Is that true? I didn't sell her. He forced me. Luke raised an eyebrow. Did I? The stepmother sputtered. Clara took a deep breath. She hit me. She starved me. She told me my father hated me and that I should have drowned with him. Gasps rippled across the room. The sheriff narrowed his eyes at the woman. Is this true? The stepmother faltered, stammered, then tried to change her story, but the sheriff had heard enough. Ma'am, I could arrest you for abuse and endangerment. That girl stays with Luke Mallory until she's of age. The stepmother went pale. Clara stood tall. Luke placed a steady hand on her shoulder as they walked out of town. Chapter 12. 7. A future finally arrest years passed. Clara grew into a strong, young woman, clever, compassionate, brave. She helped Luke run the ranch, learned bookkeeping, learned to cook without fear of being struck for mistakes, learned to ride faster than the wind. She became someone she never imagined she could be. Free, one warm evening, now 18, Clara stood beside Luke overlooking the plains. I used to think you bought me, she said softly. Like property, Luke smiled. I never bought you. I rescued you, and now, he said, you're family. Clara leaned into his side. Tears forming, but these were not tears of pain. They were tears of belonging. Final message. The heart of the STR winnow child is meant to feel unwanted. No human being is meant to suffer at the hands of those sworn to protect them. Mercy can come from unexpected places: a stranger, a cowboy passing by, single moment of courage. Luke Mallory didn't just save Clara. He gave her what every soul deserves: safety, dignity, a chance to grow. And Clara proved that even the most wounded hearts can rise again. When given love instead of judgment,